हेलो फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम बैक। सो ये एक पेपर मेरे को मिला, अर्बन प्लानिंग एंड जीआईएस। आई थिंक ये किसी यूनिवर्सिटी का वेबसाइट से मिला, जो कि हो सकता है स्टडी मटेरियल या जो भी है। तो अर्बन प्लानिंग एंड जीआईएस काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग है। तो हम अभी रिसर्च प्रपोजल बनाने की कोशिश कर रहा है, तो हम समझेंगे कि यार अर्बन ज्योग्राफी में हमारा इंटरेस्ट है तो जीआईएस कैसे इंटीग्रेट करना है, उसका कुछ बेसिक्स अगर हम जान पाए यहाँ से तो डेफिनेटली वो हमारा रिसर्च प्रपोजल बनाने में या फिर आगे जाकर रिसर्च वर्क में शायद हेल्प करेगा। तो एक बार इसको हम पढ़ेंगे, मैं भी पहले बार पढ़ूंगा और आप भी आपके मेरे साथ पढ़ सकते हो। तो ध्यान से सुनिएगा, तो आई होप आपको चीज़ें समझ में आएगा। ये एक डिस्कशन वाली वीडियो जितना हो सके डिस्कशन टाइप में बनाने की कोशिश करूँगा। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। उसके पर देखिए क्या लिखा गया है। अर्बन प्लानिंग इज वन ऑफ द मेन एप्लीकेशंस ऑफ जीआईएस. Urban planners use GIS both as a spatial database and as an analysis and modeling tool. The applications of GIS vary according to the different stages, levels, sectors, and functions of urban planning. With the increase in user friendliness and functions of GIS software and the marked decrease in the prices of GIS hardware, GIS is an operational and affordable information system for planning. It is increasingly becoming an important component of planning support systems. Recent advances in the integration of GIS with planning models, visualization, and the internet will make GIS more useful to urban planning. The main constraints in the use of GIS in urban planning today are not technical issues but the availability of data, organizational change, and staffing. The use of GIS in urban planning. तो अच्छा, यहाँ पर हमने क्या समझा एक्चुअली कि अर्बन प्लानिंग एक इम्पॉर्टेंट टूल है। एक अर्बन प्लानिंग में जीआईएस को एज ए इम्पॉर्टेंट टूल यूज़ किया जा सकता है। ठीक है, अर्बन प्लानर्स इसको डाटाबेस बनाने के लिए या फिर मॉडल करने के लिए या फिर एनालिसिस करने के लिए जीआईएस का यूज़ करता है। ठीक है, और ये जीआईएस जो है वेरियस स्टेजेस, लेवल्स और सेक्टर्स में यूज़ किया जा सकता है। और फ्रेंडलीनेस, यूजर फ्रेंडलीनेस एंड फंक्शंस ऑफ जीआईएस सॉफ्टवेयर्स आर इंक्रीजिंग, द मार्क डिक्रीज इन द प्राइसेस ऑफ जीआईएस हार्डवेयर। सो इसका प्राइस जो है बहुत घटते जा रहा है। जीआईएस इज एन ऑपरेशनल एंड अफोर्डेबल इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम फॉर प्लानिंग। तो आज ये काफ़ी अफोर्डेबल हो चुका है। इट इज इंक्रीजिंगली बिकमिंग एन इम्पॉर्टेंट कॉम्पोनेंट ऑफ प्लानिंग सपोर्ट सिस्टम and recent advances in the integration of GIS with planning models, visualization, and the internet will make GIS more useful to urban planning. However, the main constant is that the availability of data. तो हम देखेंगे, आप पढ़ना स्टार्ट करते हैं एक्चुअल कंटेंट की। द यूज ऑफ जीआईएस इन अर्बन प्लानिंग. GIS were developed in the late 1960s, yet in the early days very few planning departments installed them because of the prohibitive cost of hardware and the limited capability of the software. Most of the early software systems focused on computer mapping with few analytical functions. The most powerful software at that time was grid-based ImGrid Synton. The subsequent fall in the prices of hardware, computer storage, and peripherals, accompanying improvement in the performance of hardware and software, particularly the speed of computer processor, and advances in the data structures and related algorithms of vector-based GIS has made GIS more affordable, less time-consuming, and more workable. Since the early 1980s, there has been a marked increase in the installation of GIS in different levels and departments of urban and regional governments in the developed countries, notably of Europe and North America. See Campbell chapter 4. Okay, with the further decrease in the price of computer hardware and software, the use of GIS has emerged in urban planning in the developing countries in the 1990s. GIS is increasingly accessible to planners and is now an important tool for urban planning in developed and developing countries alike. GIS is just one of the formalized computer-based information systems capable of integrating data from various sources to provide the information necessary for effective decision making in urban planning. Other information systems for urban planning include database management system (DBMS), decision support system (DSS), and expert system. GIS serves both as a database and as a toolbox for urban planning. In a database-oriented GIS, spatial and textual data can be stored and linked using the georelational model. Current GIS support efficient data retrieval, query, and mapping. Planners can also extract data from their databases and input them to other modeling and spatial analysis programs. When combined with data from other tabular databases or specially conducted surveys, geographical information can be used to make effective planning decisions. As a toolbox, GIS allows planners to perform spatial analysis using geoprocessing functions such as map overlay, connective measurement, and buffering. Of all the geoprocessing functions, map overlay is probably the most useful tool. This is because planners have a long tradition of using map overlay in, तो ये ओवरले के बारे में हम रिसेंटली पढ़ रहे थे. ये ओवरले टेक्निक, बहुत सारे टेक्निक्स होता है, तो WB सेट के एग्जाम में आया हुआ था. ठीक है, तो काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है, और तो आप पढ़ सकते हो कि ओवरले टेक्निक्स के बारे में आप बाद में. तो चलिए क्या पढ़ा हमने. दिस इज बिकॉज प्लानर्स हैव ए लॉन्ग ट्रेडिशन इन यूजिंग मैप ओवरले इन लैंड सुटेबिलिटी एनालिसिस विच इज इटसेल्फ एन इम्पॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट इन अर्बन प्लानिंग. यहाँ पर क्या देखा है, देखो कि जीआईएस है, स्पेशल कोवेरिएंट मैपिंग है, तो जियो प्रोसेसिंग फंक्शन है, यहाँ डाटा प्लानिंग, अच्छा डेटा, स्पेशल एनालिसिस एंड मॉडलिंग, नॉन जीआईएस डेटाबेस डेटा. अच्छा यहाँ से आ रहा है स्पेशल एनालिसिस एंड मॉडलिंग, फिर अर्बन प्लानिंग में हम कर सकते हैं, या फिर जीआईएस डायरेक्टली भी अर्बन प्लानिंग में यूज़ कर सकते हैं. तो एक जो हमने अभी तक पढ़ा वो चीज़ यहाँ पर एक फ्लो चार्ट के थ्रू दिखाया जा रहा है. अच्छी बात है. Now, database management, visualization, spatial analysis and spatial modeling are the main uses of GIS in urban planning. GIS is used for the storage of land use maps and plans, socio-economic data, environmental data. तो basically देखो storage के लिए बोल रहा है किंतु and planning applications. Planners can extract useful information from the database through spatial query. Mapping provides the most powerful visualization tools in GIS. It can be used to explore the distribution of socioeconomic and environmental data and display the results of spatial analysis and modeling exercises. Spatial analysis and modeling are used for spatial statistical analysis, site selection, identification of planning action areas, land suitability analysis, land use transport modeling, and impact assessment. Interpolation, map overlay, buffering, and connectivity measurement are the most frequently used GIS functions in spatial analysis and modeling. The use of the above functions varies according to different tasks and stages of urban planning. The many benefits in using GIS in urban planning include Royal Town Planning Institute 1992. Improved mapping, better access to maps, improved map currency, more effective thematic mapping, and reduced storage cost, greater efficiency in retrieval of information, faster and more extensive access to the types of geographical information important to planning, and the ability to explore a wider range of what if scenarios, improved analysis. तो ये सारे जीआईएस के यूज़ करने से होंगे. बेटर कम्युनिकेशन टू द पब्लिक एंड स्टाफ, इम्प्रूव्ड क्वालिटी ऑफ सर्विसेज, फॉर एग्जांपल स्पीडियर एक्सेस टू इन्फॉर्मेशन फॉर प्लानिंग एप्लीकेशन प्रोसेसिंग. द यूज ऑफ GIS in different functions and stages in urban planning. Urban planning involves many functions, scales, sectors, and stages. In general, the functions of urban planning can be classified into general administration, development control, plan making, and strategic planning. General administration and development control are relatively routine planning activities, whereas plan making and non-routine strategic planning are undertaken much less frequently. The scale of the planning area covered can range from a whole city to a sub-region of a city, a district, or a street block. The most frequently involved sectors of urban planning are land use, transport, housing, land development, and environment. At each scale of planning, there are different stages: the determination of planning objectives, the analysis of existing situations, modeling and projection, development of planning options, selection of planning options, plan implementation, and plan evaluation, monitoring, and feedback. Different functions, scales, sectors, and stages of urban planning make different uses of GIS. The use of the data management, visualization, spatial analysis, and modeling components of GIS varies according to different functions of urban planning. Data management, visualization, and spatial analysis are used more in the routine work of urban planning. Spatial modeling is used more in strategic planning. General administration employs mainly data management and visualization. Finally, development controls uses the visualization and spatial analysis functions of GIS most. The more routine general administration and development control work of urban planning includes management of land use records. अच्छा, तो यहाँ पर बेसिकली ये बताया जा रहा है कि हम GIS को अर्बन प्लानिंग में कैसे, मतलब कैसे तो नहीं बट कहाँ कहाँ यूज़ कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, तो वो आपको बता दे रहा है कि यार अर्बन प्लानिंग आपको करना है तो आपको इस जगह पर GIS आपको हेल्प करेगा. management of land use records, thematic mapping, planning application processing, building control application processing, land use management, land availability and development monitoring, industrial, commercial and retail floor space recording, recreational and countryside facility planning, environment impact assessment, contaminated and relict land registers, land use or transport strategic planning, public facilities and shops, catchment area and accessibility analysis, social area and deprivation analysis, visualization, spatial analysis and spatial modeling are the most frequently used GIS functions in plan making. Webster discusses the advantages of using the data management, visualization and spatial analysis and modeling functions of GIS as scientific inputs to urban planning. Webster shows that there are significant differences in the degree of GIS used in the description, prediction and prescription planning process. Description is used more often in general administration, whereas prediction and prescription are used more often in plan making. Different scales of planning require different data and techniques. Raster data are more useful for city-wide strategic planning because large areas are involved and high resolution is not required. The processing of raster data is much faster than that of vector data. तो यहाँ पर देखो रास्टर वेक्टर के बारे में भी आपको जानने को मिल रहा है, स्पेशली इन मैप ओवरले एंड बफर एनालिसिस. तो raster data जो है द प्रोसेसिंग ऑफ raster data इज मच फास्टर दैन दैट ऑफ वेक्टर डेटा, स्पेशली इन मैप ओवरले एंड बफर एनालिसिस. ठीक है, और raster data ही क्या मोर यूजफुल है फॉर सिटी वाइड स्ट्रैटेजिक प्लानिंग. तो हम अर्बन प्लानिंग में raster data को यूज़ करेंगे rather than the vector data because it is more useful in strategic planning because of its large areas are involved and high resolution is not required in raster data, and it is also faster than that of vector data, especially in map overlay and buffer analysis. On the other hand, वेक्टर डाटा जनरली यूज्ड फॉर डिस्ट्रिक्ट एंड लोकल एक्शन एरिया प्लानिंग. ठीक है, तो लोकल एक्शन एरिया प्लानिंग के लिए हम वेक्टर डाटा को यूज़ करेंगे बिकॉज ऑफ द नीड फॉर वेरी हाई रेजोल्यूशन एनालिसिस, बिकॉज यहाँ पर रेजोल्यूशन बहुत हाई होता है. देयर आर मेनी एप्लीकेशंस ऑफ GIS इन द लैंड यूज, ट्रांसपोर्ट, हाउसिंग, लैंड डेवलपमेंट एंड एनवायरमेंटल सेक्टर्स. की एग्जाम्पल्स इंक्लूड साइट सिलेक्शन एंड लैंड सुटेबिलिटी एनालिसिस. इन कॉन्ट्रास्ट, नेटवर्क एनालिसिस एंड रूटीन सिलेक्शन आर मोस्ट फ्रीक्वेंटली यूज्ड इन ट्रांसपोर्ट प्लानिंग एंड एनवायरमेंटल प्लानिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट यूज buffer and overlay processing. There is an increasing trend toward the integration of modeling in different sectors of urban planning. The role of GIS also varies in different stages of the urban planning process. For example, GIS is more useful in modeling and development of planning options than in the determination of planning objectives. The different stages in the urban planning process can be generalized as the determination of objectives, resource inventory, analysis of existing situations, modeling and projection, development of planning options, selection of planning options, plan implementation and plan evaluation, monitoring and feedback. GIS can only provide some of the data and techniques that are needed in different stages of the urban planning process. Any GIS also has to work with other databases, techniques and models at different stages of the planning process. Resource inventory. Geographical information when integrated with remote sensing can save time in collecting land use and environmental information. Remote sensing images are becoming an important source of spatial information for urban areas. They can help to detect land use and land use changes for whole urban areas. In particular, stereoscopic pairs of digital aerial photographs can be used to derive three-dimensional CAD models of buildings for dynamic visualization of a city or for direct import into a GIS database. Analysis of existing situations. So GIS can help to store, manipulate and analyze physical, social and economic data of a city. Planners can then use the spatial query and mapping functions of GIS to analyze the existing situation in the city. Through map overlay analysis, GIS can help to identify areas of conflict of land development with the environment by overlaying existing land development on land suitability maps. Areas of environmental sensitivity can be identified using remote sensing and other environmental functions. तो आपको दिख रहा है कि क्या नहीं कर सकते आप. ठीक है, अगर आपको GIS आता है तो आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो, ऐसा लग रहा है ना. देखो आप planners can then use the spatial query and mapping functions to analyze existing situations in the city. मतलब सिटी का सिचुएशन क्या है, फिजिकल सिचुएशन क्या है, सोशल सिचुएशन क्या है, इकोनॉमिक सिचुएशन क्या है, सारे कुछ एनालिसिस कर सकते हैं. इवन आप एनवायरमेंटल सेंसिटिविटी को भी एनालाइज कर सकते हैं. Then modeling and projection. So a key function of planning is the projection of future population and economic growth. GIS can be used for prediction and projection. Spatial modeling of spatial distributions makes it possible to estimate the widest range of impacts of existing trends of population and of economic and environmental change. For example, a range of environmental scenarios can be investigated through the projection of future demand for land resources from population and economic activities, modeling of the spatial distribution of such demand, and then using GIS map overlay analysis to identify areas of conflict. Using socioeconomic and environmental data stored in GIS, environmental planning models have been developed to identify areas of environmental concern and development conflict. GIS can also, यहाँ पर दिखाया गया सारी चीज़ें जो भी हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं उसको एक फ्लो चार्ट के थ्रू यूज टू मॉडल डिफरेंट डेवलपमेंट सिनेरियोज. इट कैन शो द मॉडलिंग रिजल्ट्स इन ग्राफिक फॉर्म, मेकिंग देम इजी टू कम्युनिकेट विद द डिसीजन मेकर्स. प्लानर्स कैन यूज सच इंफॉर्मेशन टू फॉर्मुलेट डिफरेंट प्लानिंग ऑप्शंस एंड हेल्प गाइड फ्यूचर डेवलपमेंट सो दैट दे अवॉइड सच कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स. ठीक है, तो हम इतना तक पढ़े. अब इसको एक बार देख लेते हैं कि फ्लो चार्ट में क्या बताया जा रहा है. प्लानिंग प्रोसेस, जीआईएस रिप्रेजेंटेशन एंड अदर डेटाबेस एंड मॉडल. तो जीएस देखो डिटर्मिनेशन ऑफ ऑब्जेक्टिव, रिसोर्स इन्वेंटरी, एनालिसिस ऑफ एग्जिस्टिंग सिचुएशन, मॉडलिंग एंड प्रोजेक्शन, डेवलपमेंट ऑफ प्लानिंग ऑप्शन, सिलेक्शन ऑफ प्लानिंग ऑप्शंस. ये सारे रिमोट सेंसर के थ्रू हम कर सकते हैं. प्लान इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, प्लान इवैल्यूएशन, मॉनिटरिंग एंड फीडबैक, डेवलपमेंट ऑफ प्लानिंग ऑप्शन. तो इसी पॉइंट को फिर से यहाँ पर जो है डिस्कस किया जा रहा है एक्चुअली. तो हमने पहले जब देखा मॉडलिंग एंड प्रोजेक्शन, ठीक है, एनालिसिस ऑफ एग्जिस्टिंग सिचुएशंस, इस पॉइंट को एक्चुअली डिस्कस किया जा रहा है. तो हम देख लेते हैं डेवलपमेंट ऑफ प्लानिंग ऑप्शंस. इसमें क्या बताया जा रहा है. लैंड सुटेबिलिटी मैप्स आर वेरी यूजफुल इन द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ प्लानिंग ऑप्शंस. दे कैन बी यूज टू आइडेंटिफाई द सॉल्यूशन स्पेस फॉर फ्यूचर डेवलपमेंट. द एसोसिएशन ऑफ स्पेशल ऑप्टिमाइजेशन मॉडल्स विद GIS कैन हेल्प टू फॉर्मुलेट एंड डेवलप प्लानिंग ऑप्शंस विच ट्राई टू मैक्सिमाइज और मिनिमाइज सम ऑब्जेक्टिव फंक्शंस. The simulation of different scenarios of development with GIS can help in developing planning options and selection of planning options. The final selection of a planning option is increasingly a political process, but planners can provide technical inputs to this process in order to help the community in making their collective choices. The integration of spatial and non-spatial models within GIS can help to evaluate different planning scenarios. The use of GIS with multi-criteria decision analysis can provide the technical inputs in the selection of planning options. Plan implementation. So GIS can be used in the implementation of urban plans by carrying out environmental impact assessment of proposed projects to evaluate and minimize the impact of development on the environment. Following such work, remedial measures can be recommended to alleviate the impacts. Plan evaluation, monitoring and feedback. When used together with remote sensing, GIS can help to monitor the environment. It can, for example, be used to monitor land use changes. It can also examine whether land development is following the land use plan of the region by overlaying a land development map produced from the analysis of remote sensing images on the land use plan. In addition, GIS can be used to evaluate the impact of development on the environment to see whether adjustments of the plan are needed. GIS can also be used to in the monitoring and programming of land development. ओके, सो ये सारे काम में हम इसको GIS को ला सकते हैं. ये बात यहाँ पर बताया जा रहा है. अब देखो GIS स्पेशल डिसीजन सपोर्ट सिस्टम एंड प्लानिंग सपोर्ट सिस्टम इन अर्बन प्लानिंग. सो डिसीजन सपोर्ट सिस्टम वर डेवलप्ड एज ए रेस्पॉन्स टू द शॉर्टकमिंग्स ऑफ द मैनेजमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम of the late 1960s and early 1970s. At this time, MIS, that is Management Information Systems, did not adequately support and analytically modeling capabilities or facilitate the decision makers' interaction with the solution process. DSS provide a framework for integrating database management system, analytical models and graphics in order to improve decision making processes. They are designed to deal with ill or semi-structured problems which are poorly defined and partially qualitative in nature. The decision support system concept was extended to the spatial context in the development of SDSS. The architecture of SDSS is shown in figure 4. SDSS help decision makers to make decisions on different locational alternatives, for example optimal location of service centers, because of the lack of analysis functions in the past. GIS have not been considered as part of SDSS. तो यहाँ पर क्या देखा गया, आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ ए स्पेशल डिसीजन सपोर्ट सिस्टम कैसे बनता है एक्चुअली. तो देखो क्या है यूजर इंटरफेस है कुछ चलो शुरू GIS have not been considered as part of SDSS. Instead, GIS have been used to generate and store spatial data which are then used as inputs for the analytical models. Results of the analytical models were then displayed by GIS. Much research has been done on the use of GIS in the visualization of the results of the analytical models. More recently, advances have been made in incorporating analytical models into GIS. For example, location allocation and spatial interaction models have been incorporated as a standard function in ARC or Info. It is to be expected that in the future, the distinction between a GIS and spatial decision support system will become increasingly blurred. A parallel development in the planning field is the concept of a planning support system. A PSS, as first advocated by Harris, is a combination of computer-based methods and models that support planning functions. PSS not only serve as a decision support system to decision makers, but also provide the tools, models, and information used for planning. That is, the information technologies that planners use to carry out their unique professional responsibilities. Harris and Batty. PSS comprise a whole suite of related information technologies, example GIS, spreadsheets, models, and databases that have different applications in different stages of planning. The ways in which the planning process may be supported by PSS are shown in figure 5. GIS are becoming important components of CPSS by virtue of the geoprocessing, graphic display, database, and modeling capabilities they possess. However, a PSS cannot consist of a GIS alone. It must also include the full range of the बहुत कुछ लिख दिया यहाँ पर चलो छोड़ो प्लानर्स ट्रेडिशनल टूल्स फॉर इकोनॉमिक एंड डेमोग्राफिक एनालिसिस फोरकास्टिंग एनवायरमेंटल मॉडलिंग ट्रांसपोर्टेशन प्लानिंग एंड लैंड यूज मॉडलिंग इट शुड ऑल्सो इंक्लूड अदर टेक्नोलॉजीज सच एज एक्सपर्ट सिस्टम डिसीजन सपोर्ट एड्स हाइपर मीडिया सिस्टम्स एंड ग्रुप डिसीजन सपोर्ट सिस्टम। तो भाई इतना समझ में आ रहा है कि अगर R1 जी पर रिसर्च करना है तो देखो GIS को एक्सटेंसिवली यूज करना है क्योंकि कुछ सब कुछ कर सकते हो तो डेफिनेटली यूज करना चाहिए अगर तो सीखना पड़ेगा है ना GIS बहुत अच्छे से सीखना पड़ेगा। Now trends and factors influence the use of GIS in urban planning. Trends in the use of GIS in urban planning. क्या ट्रेंड चल रहा है क्या चल रहा है मार्केट में। The database management, mapping and spatial analysis functions of GIS have been very useful in many areas of urban planning. The main weakness of GIS in urban planning is their linkage with urban planning models. There are different strategies for linking planning models with GIS. They range from loosely coupled to tightly coupled and fully integrated architectures. Integration based on the loosely coupled architecture involves importing and exporting data between GIS and planning models. Data are exported from a GIS and transferred to an external program for execution. The modeling results may be sent back to GIS for display and further analysis. Tightly coupled architecture integration involves writing programs within the GIS environment, avoiding explicit data transfer between software packages. Today, the loosely coupled architecture is the most commonly used in the integration of planning models and GIS. The California Urban Futures model uses the loosely coupled approach in the integration of GIS with models. It makes use of GIS extensively for data manipulation and displaying the results of external modeling packages. Such an approach is also used in multiple criteria decision-making planning methods. The tightly coupled approach has been used for residential location modeling in the Buffalo, USA region. Currently, there is an increasing trend toward the development of fully integrated planning models in GIS. For example, location allocation and spatial interaction models are now in ARC or Info. This saves the users from programming the models themselves. However, until most of the commonly used planning models are fully integrated in GIS, there is still a need for loosely coupled and tightly coupled architectures. The issue of software coupling is discussed in a business and service planning context by Barkin et al. And in relation to the development of desktop GIS by Elsaw, Thrall and Thrall. कुछ भी यार चलो data visualization is very useful for planning. It can help planners to explore data and calibrate and visualize the results of planning models. It is useful for displaying the results of complicated location allocation models. It can also enhance human-computer interaction in the decision-making process. Thus, data visualization is a very valuable GIS function in a planning decision support system, and the development of user-friendly data visualization functions has made GIS more useful to planning. Okay, the integration of multimedia data types and the use of GIS in the internet or intranet environment, especially www are some of the recent GIS developments that have had great impacts on urban planning. The incorporation of images, videos, aerial photographs, and sound within GIS can increase the planner's comprehension of the planning problem that they are analyzing. The integration of GIS with virtual reality can enable planners to examine the space that they are planning more realistically. The internet and internets are useful for communicating design ideas. The use of GIS in the internet and www environment can also facilitate the dissemination of planning information and enhance citizen participation in the planning process. Unlike the past, in which citizens had to go physically to the town hall to examine plans, they can now see them in their offices and homes by the internet at any time. देखो यही है कि unlike the past, in which citizens had to go physically to the town hall to examine plans, they can now see them in their offices. The www can help in the development of multimedia-based collaborative planning systems. Now, factors influence the use of GIS in urban planning. The use of the GIS in urban planning does not depend solely on the development of new GIS software and hardware. Indeed, these considerations may be amongst the least important in influencing whether GIS is used in urban planning in a city. The status and character of the organization, data, state of the art of planning, and staff are more important factors, and this section considers their importance with particular regard to developing countries. Okay, so organization. No matter how sophisticated and advanced it is, a decision support system is useless if it is not being used by decision makers. Studies on the applications of GIS repeatedly show that staff and organizational factors are more important than technology in successful application of GIS. हाँ, किसी का अगर यूज़ करना ही नहीं आता तो कैसे करेंगे? There are three sets of conditions that are important in effective implementation of GIS. An information management strategy that identifies the needs of users and takes account of the resources at the disposal of the organization. Commitment to and participation in the implementation of any form of information technology by individuals at all levels of the organization. A high degree of organizational and environmental stability. GIS that are most likely to be used are those that can deal with identifiable problems. More complex applications are less likely to be developed than simple ones. Now, data. The lack of available data remains one of the major hindrances in the use of GIS. As a type of information system, GIS needs graphic and textual data in order to function. There is no life in GIS without applications, and there can be no application if there are no data. Yes, without data, GIS is nothing. In short, data are vital to GIS. In the developed countries, a reasonable amount of geographical data are available, thus making the establishment of a GIS relatively easy, if sometimes expensive. Unfortunately, data not so readily available in the developing countries. The most readily available data are those from remote sensing, which means that they are restricted largely to land cover information, from which a very limited amount of information about land use can be extracted. Because of this, it is not surprising to find that data content in GIS in developing countries are primarily concerned with the physical environment and land cover. Socio-economic data, which are vital to urban and regional planning, are generally lacking and often limited only to population census data. तो हम इंडिया में अगर रिसर्च करेंगे सोशियो इकोनॉमिक तो डेटा नहीं मिलने वाला, GIS में डेटा नहीं मिलने वाला, तो ये एक हिंड्रेंस होगा शायद. सोशियो इकोनॉमिक डेटा रिक्वायर फील्ड सर्वेज व्हिच आर एक्सपेंसिव एंड टाइम कंज्यूमिंग. हाँ, अगर डेटा के लिए पहले तो हमें काम करना है ना ग्राउंड में जाकर, तो वो भी नहीं हुआ है. इन अ स्टडी ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम्स फॉर प्लानिंग इन Ghana, ECOM find that there is a lack of up-to-date and reliable data for planning because some departments are also slow in the acquisition of data, and coordination among various departments and institutions in the flow and exchange of information is weak. The lack of financial resources and trained personnel to collect data and the unavailability of modern and efficient data processing equipment are also cited as inhibiting factors. The relatively low price of microcomputers can help to alleviate some of the harder constraints in electronic data processing facilities. However, the main obstacles still lie in the failure of developing country governments to recognize the need for statistical information for planning and their willingness to and ability to mobilize resources to collect it. In many developing countries, the base maps, which are more essential than textual data to GIS, are often lacking or outdated. There are usually many types of base map, each compiled by different agencies with different accuracy and map scales. This makes them difficult to integrate into GIS. Furthermore, there is a general lack of a standardized geocoding system, which makes it difficult to link the textual data and graphic data. It is of course difficult to start GIS without the necessary maps, geocoding systems, and textual information. merits of so-called framework data. अच्छा इसको framework data बोला जाता है शायद. It is not only the availability of data which is a problem in developing countries, but their quality too. The currency of data is very important in planning because data will be of a limited use if they are outdated. There is unfortunately a lack of institutional arrangements to determine, coordinate and monitor the frequency of data updating by different departments. A fairly large amount of data used for planning in developing countries are collected by agencies over which the planning agency has little control. Additionally, there are no procedures for verifying the quality of the data collected. There has been a misconception that hardware, software and human resources are major constraints on the use of GIS in urban planning in the developing countries. In fact, the availability of up-to-date data is the most important bottleneck in preventing GIS from being used effectively in the developing countries. There is an urgent need to establish an institutional framework to ensure that the required data regularly collected and updated. State of the art of planning. The state of the art in planning in the developing countries has not advanced much in comparison to GIS. The skills of planners and the planning systems may not be ready to utilize the data and functions provided by GIS. Planners could employ GIS in conjunction with new planning techniques so that they are better able to diagnose potential problems and assess the desirability of alternative plans. In spite of this, most planners in the developing countries are not yet aware of the benefits and potential applications of GIS. Furthermore, even though much effort has been spent on data collection, comparatively little has been spent on transforming data into information for making planning decisions. Staffing. With the rapid growth of GIS, there is a shortage of human resources even in the developed countries. This shortage is more severe in the developing countries both in absolute numbers and relative terms. There are very few people who know about GIS in developing countries. The shortage of skilled personnel is currently very severe, especially given the number of cities and regions in the developing countries that can benefit from GIS. The problem of training is very severe in the developing countries because of the lack of expertise and shortage of funds. In developing countries, GIS is often led by teaching and research in the universities. Okay, यही होते हैं. GIS is often led by teaching and research in the university. The reverse is the case in many developing countries where very often it is government agencies which buy and use GIS first through funding. Oh sorry, उल्टा बोल दिया मैंने. The problem of training is very severe in the developing countries because of the lack of expertise and shortage of funds. In developing countries, GIS is often led by teaching and research in the universities. हाँ ठीक है. The reverse is the case in many developing countries where very often it is government agencies which buy and use GIS first through funding from international agencies. It can be several years later before GIS equipment is installed and courses are offered in universities and other tertiary institutes. Training of GIS personnel is often carried out by software companies by either sending their staff to run short courses on site or sending the operators and users to be trained in their headquarters. GIS courses and training programs, if available in the developing countries, are normally carried out in the departments of surveying, remote sensing and geography. देखो यहाँ पर जियोग्राफी के नाम आ जाते हैं. देयर इज ऑल्सो जनरल लैक ऑफ GIS courses in planning schools. To use GIS more effectively in planning, planners must be trained not so much in the operation of the system but in how to make use of the data and functions of GIS in different processes of planning and plan evaluation. Conclusion: GIS are increasingly being used in planning agencies in the developed and developing countries. Many planning departments that have acquired mapping systems in the past have since shifted to GIS in lieu of mapping software. With the increase in user friendliness and the number of functions of GIS software and the marked decrease in the prices of GIS hardware, GIS is now an operational and affordable information system for planning. It is increasingly becoming an important component in the planning support system. Recent advances in the integration of GIS with planning models, visualization and the internet will make GIS more useful to urban planning. Today, the main constraints on the use of GIS in urban planning are not technical issues but the availability of data, organizational change and staffing. तो ये हमने रिसर्च को पढ़ा. आई थिंक कुछ चीज़ें आपको समझ में आएगा. मेरे को भी कुछ चीज़ें जानने को लिए मिला कि यार हाँ, GIS को हम हर काम में यूज़ कर सकते हैं बट अर्बन प्लानिंग के लिए स्पेशली. बट जो है उसके लिए डाटा बहुत ज़रूरी है और डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के लिए ये डाटा एक प्रॉब्लम है. ठीक है, कि लैक ऑफ डाटा के कारण हम वहाँ पर GIS को सही इस्तेमाल नहीं कर पाएंगे. अगर हमारे पास टेक्नोलॉजी भी है बट डाटा के लैक ऑफ डाटा के कारण हम नहीं कर पाएंगे क्योंकि जो इनिशियल डाटा है वो सर्वे से ही आ सकता है और वो उस कंट्री में सर्वे करवाना एक फंडिंग, सर्वे करवाने के लिए बहुत सारे फंडिंग की ज़रूरत पड़ेगी जो कि डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज अभी एफर्ट नहीं कर पा रहा है. तो ये सारे कुछ चीज़ें जानने को लिए मिला। अब देखो सेमेस्टर में अगर एग्ज़ाम आ सकते हैं, सेमेस्टर एग्ज़ाम में क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि जीआईएस को अर्बन प्लानिंग में कैसे यूज किया जा सकता है, जैसे कि अर्बन जियोग्राफी में हो सकता है पेपर रहा हो, बट ठीक है। तो उसके लिए भी उस क्वेश्चन का आंसर करने के लिए भी आपको ये जो है पेपर हेल्प करेगा। तो चलिए यहीं पे समाप्त करते। थैंक यू।